optimistic reading is, at least be humble enough to not think that you're all that. Don't ever have too much pride. The other reading of this is, of course, the more negative, fearful reading of this. No matter how great things are, yeah, there's always a nasty future possibly coming. You will never know whether you're fully happy until the last moment when you draw your last breath. Which takes us, of course, back to the Socratic insight that at the moment of death, everyone says the words, "Oh my God." The only question is the inflection of the voice. Most people have lived their life in such a way they're not so pleased with the life that they have to leave, right? Well, let's jump to some messages here. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of them. And because I've given lectures on this play elsewhere and we've talked about levels 2 and 3, I'll go through this quickly. Obviously, one major message, and I think this is the central message for Sophocles, is the reverence for the gods. You can laugh at the gods, Jocasta. You can somehow try and countervene Jocasta and Laius and Oedipus, those oracles, but the gods will have their way. In other words, reverence the gods. Never speak in disreverence against them. Of course, fate versus free will is huge. You have it both ways in this play, don't you? It's the will of the gods, which sounds like fate, and yet Oedipus says, I made all these choices. I chose to leave Corinth. I chose to kill Laius on the crossroads. I could have let him go. Instead, I confronted him. We had our fight. I killed him. Blah, 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 right? Another message. Sometimes the best of intentions don't matter. It doesn't matter what the intentions are. Sometimes the very best thing, I once had a student that said, I sent a text to my best friend because I thought she needed to hear what I had to say. I did it with the best of intentions, and it destroyed so many things, not just our friendship. There it is, right? Classic example. The ripple effects, in other words, of actions. And we mustn't forget that. And yet that's disturbing because this play suggests, no, Oedipus didn't mean for any of this to happen. And then we're back to that whole scapegoat thing again, right? At level 2b, the rhetoric level, of course we've been mentioning these symbols. Blindness and sight is a powerful symbol. Think about Tiresias as well as Oedipus in that regards. How about the plague? That's an interesting symbol. We began with the plague, right? And we have the plague that's outside. People are getting sick and dying. And then we have the plague that's inside, right? Think about, for example, our comments in T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. We've given a lecture on that one as well. T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, and of course the Arthurian legend as well, where as goes the king, so goes the state. If you've got a sick king, you have a sick country, and you have to drink from the grail to be able to find relief, right? Oedipus, of course, no question, he is a scapegoat, that kind of symbol of the scapegoat, right? The one that takes on the sins. Many, St. Augustine comes to mind, but many Christian writers have looked at the Oedipal story and seen as well kind of the Christ-like story as well, taking on the sins of Thebes for Oedipus, taking on the sins of the world for Christ in that theology, right? The conflict, well, you got so many, right? Obviously, fate versus free will and choice and all of that. The notion of life and death. Do you think it was the right thing for Oedipus to blind himself versus kill himself? Why doesn't Oedipus commit suicide? Well, some have said because it's a worse punishment to stay alive blind and to know all the terrible things that you've done, you have to live with every day as opposed to suicide. Finally, of course, think about and some have seen this as the central motif of the riddles. Those three roads that converge at the crossroads. The riddles, the riddle of life, the riddle of the oracle, the riddle of the sphinx, the riddle of the plague, and on and on and on the riddles go, right? That is to say, who are you? The Delphi challenge to know thyself, right? Some have pointed out that it's Socrates who says in the Apology, the unexamined life is not worth living. But does that mean that the examined life is worth living? What if you examine your life and then discover, if you're Oedipus, some really, really terrible things? At what point should Oedipus have stopped examining? And yet, that's the heroic nature of Oedipus. Like Odysseus finding his way home, he will not stop Oedipus, even though it means his own destruction. Well, how are you going to relate this to other texts? Without question, this is one of the most famous myths of all time, and it gets alluded to a lot. We mentioned this whole thing about Freud. You can do your own research on the Oedipal complex. It was a controversial idea because he, in many ways, rewrote the myth, but then the myth has been rewritten many, many times and in many different ways to mean different things. I think what Freud probably, though, was getting to, and it had to do with that one line that we were referencing, is that we act, but we have motivations that lie behind those actions, and a lot of times those motivations are unknown. And I think often there's, it's a misapplication, I think, in some ways, certainly of what Freud does with this. But I think that point that Freud makes is legitimate to consider. We do act out of motivations, but we don't always know what those motivations are. They are sometimes sublimated in some ways, and that'll be his view. Of course, we can think about all kinds of popular films that play kind of these same games. I mean, I had a student once that said, wait, I get it. At the end of the Star Wars, the very first one, there's a reason why Luke and Leia cannot fall in love and be lovers, because they're brother and sister. They just don't know it. That notion that you don't know about your background, and so because you don't know about it, when you discover it, well then, that's always interesting. Of course, you could ask this question, what for you are your favorite texts about paying for a mistake that someone made but didn't mean to make? Jot down, what is your favorite text where that happens? Okay, we said it at the beginning of the lecture, we always say it in 303. The challenge of studying these classic texts is, can you relate personally to this? We're not going to ask you if you've ever wished to kill your dad, marry your mom, and have kids. That's too simple and that's too strange. So we'll stay away from a question like that. But we will ask some of these questions. Do you pity Oedipus in this play? The way Aristotle said in Poetics that you must, if you watch this play, you have to feel sorry for him, but you also have to have some sense of fear. Wow, when was the last time I made a mistake that I didn't know it was a mistake? I thought it was something good. Who else do you pity? Do you pity Jacusta? Should she have listened to the oracle and killed her son outright? Right? There's so many of these nasty dilemmas. We saw this in the Aristotle, didn't we? Where there's no easy answer. There's no right answer at all, right? How about this one? A time you were like Oedipus. Not that you killed your dad, married your mom. No, none of that. But a time that you got jacked for doing something you didn't know it was something bad. You really thought it was something good. And even as you were trying to defend it, maybe later you were like, no, you don't understand. I sent that text because I was like really trying to help. I really was. I was trying to be a good person and it ended up destroying everything. And there's no takebacks. That's the other part of this. There's no takebacks. A time when you did something and it's too late and you realize, Oedipus blind has better sight than Oedipus with his eyes. Of course, this leads to a very interesting philosophic question. And again, guys, none of what I'm saying here is unique to McGee and 303. Lots and lots of people, like I said, this is a play that's been spun a lot. But think about this. If you watch this play, and one of the primary messages of this play is things that you think you're doing that are good actually end up jacking you and lots of people around you. Well, it begs the question, how do you ever act? Jacusta says you just have to live your life random and not worry about the ripple effects. And yet, look what happens to Jacusta, right? If you know that things could end badly, right, then how do you ever act with confidence? Right? Which does beg another interesting question. Do you believe there are some people who are cursed with bad luck? In our lecture on Lawrence's The Rocking Horse Winter, we asked this question, right? You believe in this notion of good luck, bad luck. For the students that say, I don't believe in bad luck or good luck, I will ask, well, really, what about the child that's born to a meth mom under a bridge in Detroit? You going to call that good luck? Because that seems like pretty crummy luck. So how come, for example, some people get seriously bunged and you get such a great life? Like, what is that all about? Or is it the opposite? The reason I have a crappy life is because I'm kind of cursed with bad luck. Do you believe in that idea? Right. Well, we'll go on now to the rest of the story. Oedipus leaves Thebes, never to return, and he goes to a small town called Colonus, and there he will, in fact, die. And the play, Oedipus at Colonus, the last play Sophocles wrote, we believe, is a great play, but it is not included in this volume. What is included in this volume is the last of the Oedipal cycle, which ironically was the very first play that Sophocles wrote of this cycle, called Antigone. And we're here going to find out what happens to Oedipus's 4 kids. And let's just say it out loud. This will not shock you. It is sad. It is tragic, right? Go back to my lecture on Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, when Sophocles heard it long ago in the Aegean, those lines. And we talk about why Sophocles, every time he heard the sound of the Mediterranean and the ocean on the beach, he always thought about human misery and human suffering. Well, Sophocles obviously is going to make us cry our eyes out some more when we come to the text Antigone. We'll see you back for lecture number 65. I hope you're having as much fun studying this stuff as I am studying it with you. Thank you.